carried away with my own eloquence. So, yeah, there's a time and place for profanity. When I was in the SEAL teams, I used to swear a lot when making a point. And when making a point, obviously, you want to make it stick. Mm-hmm. This is something I think I've talked about this before, but I would bring my son out to training events, and I never swear in front of my family. Like, even right now, I don't swear in front of my family. Mm-hmm. So when my son was probably, like 6 years old, 7 years old, and I'd bring him out to a training site to observe some training, so he could start getting kind of inoculated to the loud noises, machine gun fire, teaching him the fundamentals of tactics and stuff. So when he'd come out and watch training, and then I would be debriefing, and it would just be F-bomb, sentence, half sentence, F-bomb, F-bomb. Yeah. I remember the first time he saw me debrief like that, and it's also the first time he probably saw me, I don't want to use the word emotional, but it's the first time he saw real intensity from me, because you're trying to make a point to the guys, and I will freely say that at the time, I would get really in the zone because I'm thinking that the guys that I'm training, I want them to absorb the message because I don't want them to go overseas and get killed. So, there's some levels of intensity that would happen. So, yeah, sometimes the language comes out and should have an impact. If you use it too much, obviously, loses its impact. So, like I said, we covered Patton's book, War as I Knew It, a long time ago. But Patton didn't just write that book. He actually was a fairly prolific writer. And some of what he wrote wasn't meant to be literature. It was things like general instructions to his troops. So I got some of those for us to look at just because they're good stuff. So this is one. There's two that we're going to go over today. This is from Headquarters, 3rd United States Army, 6 March 1944. Subject, Letter of Instruction number 1 to Corps, Division, and Separate Unit Commanders. So this is one that's written to the commanders of the subordinate units underneath Patton. Starts off with General. This letter will orient you, officers of higher echelons, in the principles of command, combat procedure, and administration which obtain in this Army, and will guide you in the conduct of your several commands. Part number 2, command. Leadership, full duty. Each in his appropriate sphere will lead in person. Any commander who fails to obtain his objective and who is not dead or severely wounded has not done his full duty. That's, by the way, just how he's kicking this thing off. Yeah. and we've definitely talked about that one before, but there you go. Welcome to working for George Patton. If you fail to obtain your objective and you're not dead or severely wounded, then you haven't done your duty. So that's the basis on which we're building this stuff. Continues, visits to the front. The commanding general or his chief of staff, never both at once, and one member of each of the general staff sections should visit the front daily. To save duplication, the chief of staff will designate the sector each is to visit. The function of these staff officers is to observe, not to meddle. Very important. Don't go up there and start trying to make little changes. No, you're up there to observe. Continuing, in addition to their own specialty, they must observe and report anything of military importance. Remember, too, that your primary mission as a leader is to see with your own eyes and to be seen by the troops while engaged in personal reconnaissance. So, think about that. Not just see what's going on, you want them to see you, too, that you're out there with the troops. Next section is execution. In carrying out a mission, the promulgation of the order represents not over 10% of your responsibility. The remaining 90% consists of assuring by means of personal supervision on the ground by yourself and your staff proper and vigorous execution. How important is that? The passing of the order is 10% of your duties. The other 90% is making sure it gets done. You don't hear that very often. Yeah. Hey, I told them what to do. That's all. That's right. I passed the word, man. Yeah. I passed the word. Not my fault. Not my problem. Wrong answer. That's actually only say it, that's actually 90% of your problem. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, one that I've maybe used. I don't know. Maybe heard. I don't know. It's like, hey, I can only say it so many times. Kind of thing.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I've told them a bunch of times. Yeah. I sent the email. Yeah. I sent the email. No, 10% of your responsibility is passing the information. 90% is assuring by means of personal supervision on the ground. Vigorous, proper and vigorous execution. Yeah. Think about that next time you put out the word and then you kick back into your chair. Yeah. Wrong answer. Next here, staff conferences. I'm going to abbreviate this thing. Daily at the earliest possible moment that the G2 and G3 can get their maps posted. So G2 and G3, that's intel and operations. As soon as they can get their maps posted, a staff conference will be held, attended by the commanding general, chief of staff, and the heads of all general staff sections. And he goes through who those are. Then the reason I highlighted this part, because I'm not reading this whole thing, but he says, any person present with a statement to make will do so briefly. Check. You're not in there to talk. You're not in there to hear yourself talk. You're not in there so that the commanding general, the boss, the CEO gets to see that you're in there and you said something smart. Mm-hmm. Actually, just be quiet. And if you have to say something, make it brief. It's supposed to be a brief. That's why it's called a brief. Yeah, and just to mention that again, I'm not reading this entire thing, but we're reading some big chunks of it. Talks about rest periods. Okay? Rest periods. And we know there's big controversy from my world when it comes to rest. Because once a day, no, that's probably inaccurate. Probably between 1 and 3 times a day, someone via various social media, messaging, whatever, says to me, get more rest and you don't sleep enough and all these things. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, my world is going to turn into a disaster, which, waiting on that one. So sure. Here's what, and you know what I always say, of course, it's in the book, Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. I wrote a book and said, you need to get sleep. Sleep is important. Without sleep, all these bad things happen. Mm-hmm. I know this, and I propagate it all the time. Sleep. When someone says, you're telling people not to sleep. No, actually, I tell people to sleep all the time. Yeah. You need to sleep. To perform optimally, you need to sleep. Different people need different amounts of sleep. However much sleep you need, get it. It's fine. It's great. I support it. So does Patton. Here we go. Rest periods. Staff personnel, commissioned and enlisted who do not rest do not last. All sections must run a duty roster and enforce compliance. The intensity of staff operations during battle is periodic. At the Army and Corps levels, the busiest times are the period from 1 to 3 hours after daylight and from 3 to 5 hours after dark. In the lower echelons and in the administrative and supply staffs, the time periods is different, but just as definite. When the need arises, everyone must work all the time. But these emergencies are not frequent. Unfatigued men last longer and work better at high pressure. So, like I tell people all the time, get sleep. Not bad for you. Do you need to sleep until 9? No, you don't. Well, some people do.
Depends when you go.
I didn't receive a return text from you today until I'm thinking it was around 10.
Yeah.
Am I right or wrong?
Well, you're probably right. I don't have those records.
We can check. So, Is that what time you woke up, just out of curiosity?
Yes.
Do you feel well rested right now? Ready to perform?
Yes.
Ready to bring your A game?
Yes, sir, I do. See, it's a long story.
And it's worth it.
Yeah, okay.
It's worth it. Were you up late last night watching the fights?
No.
Connor's fight was
super early.
Connor's fight was only 40 seconds long.
Yeah.
You could have been in bed at We're talking 9.
I was going to bed, and I literally going to bed when I seen the results come through.
Okay.
But I'm not used to going to sleep that early, so I ended up waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to go back to sleep, and then you hit the rest of it.
Yep.
Woke up at 10.
Okay. So rest is important. There you go. It's an order from Patton that you need to get rest. Next section is location of command posts. The farther forward the command posts are located, the less time is wasted in driving to and from the front. The ideal situation would be for the Army command post to be within 1.5 hours drive in a command post and reconnaissance car of the division command post. The driving time to the front and from the command post, the driving time to the front from the command post of the lower units should be correspondingly shorter. Much time and wire saved if command posts of higher units are at or near one of the command posts of the next lower echelon. So, why am I talking about that? Because the reason is, think about how important communication is between the senior leadership and the frontline troops. And when you have big separation, now what's nice these days, and he goes into a bunch of stuff talking about when he's talking about wire versus radio. Do you know what that means? They used to actually string out wire. So if you had a forward post 2 miles from me, we would string wire between the two of us so we could talk.
Like phone wire.
Yeah, like phone wire, like little phone wire. Huh. And in that opening speech when he's talking about a guy in Tunisia putting wire up on a telephone, that's what he's talking about. Yeah. Because radios at that time were way less reliable than they are now. Yeah. So now we can overcome a lot of this with technology, but just showing the importance of, and by the way, he's not even talking about wire. He's talking about being able to go there and see what's happening. Mm-hmm. So there's ways to overcome this. I guess my point in calling this out is showing how important visible leadership is, right? How important face-to-face is from a leadership perspective. Combat procedure, next section, maps. We are too prone to believe that we acquire merit solely through the study of maps in the safe seclusion of a command post. Maps are necessary in order to see the whole panorama of battle and to permit intelligent planning. Further, and this is very important, a study of the map will indicate where critical situations exist or are apt to develop, and so indicate where the commander should be. In the higher echelons, a layered map of the whole theater is reasonable to scale, showing roads, railways, streams, and towns more useful than a large-scale map cluttered up with the ground force. So the reason that I put this in here is looking visually at something real. Mm-hmm. This is a little bit of a just an eye opener, right? You have everything's virtual now, right? We can look at virtual charts, we can see virtual diagrams, we can see virtual spreadsheets, we can see market data, and I get it. And there's much of the time, virtual data has some superior qualities of it because you can manipulate it, you can watch it move, you can dig into it, you can click on the link, right? And see where the source of the data is, and all that stuff is good. All I'm saying, and the only reason I bring this up is because sometimes the physical map, the physical chart, the physical spreadsheet that you can look at, that you can put up on a wall and say, let's talk through this. Sometimes, and part of this I think is just my personality, the way that people have different types of learning, right? The way my brain works, sometimes to look at something that's actually physically there, sometimes works better for me than the virtual thing that I'm looking at on a screen. Yeah. Just throwing that out there.
Makes sense.
I don't know if you feel that way.
Well, I feel like if, when you're talking about a map or even like a diagram, if I have it physically in front of me and then you're obviously physically in front of me. Mm-hmm. So we're both physically there. We can kind of interact with it in the physical world. So I can point here and maybe even mark it here with a pencil.
Which you can do. That's what I'm saying. Like nowadays, you can have a